It started like any other crime. A couple parked by the side of the road, a quiet, secluded spot just outside Vallejo, California. Lover's Lane, they called it. The kind of place where teenagers went to escape the world. But on July 4th, 1969, it became a scene of horror. The call came in just after midnight, a double shooting. I arrived on the scene, the beam from my flashlight slicing through the darkness. The car, a blue Chevrolet, sat still under the moonlight. Inside, a young woman, Darlene Farron, lay slumped in the driver's seat, her body riddled with bullet holes. Next to her, a young man, Michael Majot, clung to life, gasping for breath. His blood soaked the seat, his face twisted in agony, but he was still alive, barely. The attacker had vanished into the night, leaving behind no trace, no fingerprints, no clear motive. I spoke briefly with Michael before the ambulance arrived. He was incoherent, mumbling about a man in a dark car who had approached them, shot without warning, then fled. There was no robbery, no argument, just a senseless, brutal attack. I'd been on the force long enough to know that most killings come with a reason. A lover's quarrel, a debt unpaid. But this felt different, cold, calculated, the kind of crime that chilled you to the bone because it seemed to come from nowhere. Then came the letter. A week after the murders, the San Francisco Chronicle received a cryptic, handwritten message. It started simply enough. Dear editor, I am the killer of the two teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Vallejo. He signed it, the Zodiac. Along with the letter came a cipher, a series of bizarre symbols, almost taunting us to decode it. He demanded it be printed on the front page of the newspaper, or he'd kill again. The Zodiac, as he called himself, was playing a game, and we were his pawns. This wasn't just about murder. This was a twisted puzzle, and we were caught in it. Each letter, each cipher, was a piece of his sick plan. He craved the attention, relished the fear he caused. But as a detective, it was my job to push aside the terror, to follow the leads, and to find the man behind the mask. More killings followed, each one a vicious reminder that we were no closer to catching him. The next victims, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were attacked near Lake Berryessa in Napa County. I arrived at the scene later, long after the killer had left. Cecilia, her white dress soaked in blood, was found barely conscious, stabbed repeatedly. She died later in the hospital. Brian somehow survived the attack and recounted the horror. A man had approached them wearing a hooded mask and a symbol on his chest, a crosshair, the symbol of the Zodiac. He tied them up, spoke calmly, almost methodically, and then began stabbing them without mercy. I felt a gnawing frustration building inside me. We had a sketch, a description, letters from the killer himself, but every lead hit a dead end. He knew how to slip through our fingers, how to taunt us with just enough information to keep us chasing shadows. Then came the killing of Paul Stein, a cab driver in San Francisco. This time, the Zodiac had taken a trophy, Paul's bloody shirt, which he mailed to the Chronicle as proof of his crime. He was becoming more bold, more brazen. He wanted us to know he was untouchable, but we were getting closer, or so it seemed. Eyewitnesses described a man leaving the scene of Paul Stein's murder. And for the first time, we had a composite sketch, a white male, mid-30s, with short hair and glasses. We flooded the streets with his image, combed through records, questioned hundreds of suspects, but none of them fit. The Zodiac sent more letters, mocking us, playing his game. He claimed dozens of victims, though we could only tie him definitively to a handful. He gave us clues, bits of information, but always just enough to keep us running in circles. The letters stopped after a few years, but the Zodiac never left my mind. Even in the silence, I could feel him out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. In the years that followed, we tried everything, matching handwriting samples, analyzing the ciphers, running down every lead, no matter how thin. At one point, a suspect named Arthur Lee Allen emerged. He fit the profile, a troubled man with a history of violence, someone who knew the victim's areas well. But we never had enough to arrest him, and in 1992, Allen died, leaving the case wide open. DNA evidence wasn't advanced enough back then, and as the years passed, the case grew cold. The Zodiac was never caught, never unmasked. To this day, his identity remains a mystery, a phantom that slipped through our grasp time and time again. The twist? Despite all the terror, all the horror he inflicted on the Bay Area, the Zodiac Killer's reign of fear ended not with a capture, but with silence. He vanished into history, his name etched in infamy, his puzzles still unsolved. And me, I'm left haunted by the faces of his victims, by the letters that mocked our efforts, and by the knowledge that somewhere, out there, he may still walk among us.